AllSet Learning.
I started studying Chinese as an undergrad at Union College and came to Shanghai to study at Fudan for the summer of 2003. And then after graduating from Union, went to Middlebury in 2005 to study for a summer. I liked it so much that I went back again in 2006 before moving to Shanghai full-time. And I've continued studying since, during the summer in Beijing and also with AllSet Learning here in Shanghai. I studied for about a year on and off before going to Middlebury. So when I went in, there's 4 levels, basically equivalent to years of undergraduate Chinese education. So I was a second year the first time, and the second time I was a third year. So the first year is really people go in with zero knowledge, absolute beginners. Fourth year is advanced, and sometimes there's a fifth year, which is like classical Chinese. Going in for the first time, I was a year 2 student, and it was a bit challenging for me. I think my foundation was a little weak, and so I was catching up in some areas. But when I came out, I definitely noticed a drastic improvement in my speaking and listening and reading and writing, everything across the board. And the same thing is true when I did it a second time for the third year. So it's the summer. Middlebury is a traditional undergraduate university during the year, and then the summer program is, I think, 9 weeks for Chinese. They have every summer, I believe it's 7 or 8 different languages, and each language school, even though you're sharing the campus and you see the other students, is really pretty separate because you sign the language pledge. So you say that I'm going to speak nothing but the language I'm studying, and even when you're in the same library with all these other students, you're typically only talking to the students who are in your program and using the language you're studying. So of course it's up to the students as to how strict they want to be with themselves, but you certainly notice that the people who do uphold the pledge make bigger progress. I'd say most of the students, almost exclusively, are all American undergraduates. There are some who are a little older, maybe non-traditional students. All the teachers, though, with the exception of one when I was there, were Chinese nationals, and there was one foreign guy teaching. So the instruction is from native speakers, but all the students are foreign, American. So I think it was a mix. First of all, I'd studied at Fudan previously in Shanghai, and I found that that wasn't a great environment. If you're only in China for a summer, for me, I didn't want to spend my time learning characters in my dorm room. I wanted to go out and explore the city and meet Chinese people. When you're in the middle of nowhere, Vermont, there's not much to do besides taking a high career studying. So I think that helps people to focus. I do think the teachers they had were good in that they understood teaching Chinese as a second language with Western methods. So whereas I found at Fudan there was a lot of focus on pure memorization, Middlebury gave you a lot of opportunities to speak and to listen. The structure every day was 4 hours of class in the morning. First 2 hours were in a larger group class, I think of about 15 students, and then there was the smaller classes that were 4 to 6 students with one teacher, and so a lot of speaking practice, I think, as much as you can get if you're not doing one-on-one. In the afternoon, there was then a one-on-one session for about 15 minutes, and at night you had everyone was studying, and then you had open office hours with the professors. So I think that the teachers were very good, but also the environment that they create, when you're forced to speak Chinese, helps a lot. Well, you're definitely getting feedback so every day, the first 2 hours, you'd be studying new grammar points, new vocabulary, going over a new chapter in the book, and then when you broke down to the smaller group, you're really just drilling those grammar points and vocab words. So if you're in a classroom of 4 or 6, you're speaking pretty often, and the teacher is correcting everyone individually. You're listening to your classmates make mistakes, and they're being corrected too. And then when you do the one-on-one session, of course, there's a lot of correction. So I think, of course, being one-on-one is the most feedback you can get, but short of that, you do get a lot of feedback. I guess the classes were fairly traditional in terms of covering vocab and grammar, using textbooks. Sometimes there were some outside materials or things the teachers prepared. Outside of class at night, there'd be sometimes speakers, everything from Chinese culture to people talking about linguistics. On weekends, there'd be movies, Chinese language movies with subtitles. A lot of people did some sports, or soccer was a big thing. So in the afternoon, to let loose a little bit, people are running around and playing soccer. The different schools would play against each other. Something that's kind of cool is that you're playing with your language school team and speaking in that language. And so, for example, the Chinese school is playing the French school, and the Chinese students are speaking in Chinese to each other, and the French students are speaking in French to each other, and not really speaking to each other. And it's, you really feel like you're almost two different countries. So I think at the time you spend a lot of time, it's almost like a boot camp. Every morning, lots of classes, you're exhausted by the end, eat lunch, spend time doing the one-on-one with the professors, maybe meeting with a group to do some teamwork, maybe taking a break to exercise, play soccer, take a nap, whatever, and then in the evening, pretty much studying with an occasional talk. But I have to say, at the time, you're focused on the fact that it's hot, there's mosquitoes, you're living in a dormitory with no air conditioning, the food, which is pretty good for cafeteria food, gets old. In retrospect, I think you forget all those things, and the reason why I was crazy enough to do it a second time was you remember the fun times playing soccer, speaking with your friends, parties on the weekends, hanging out with the teachers. I think that as hard as all the students are working, the teachers are working just as hard, and when you see that, that's motivation to keep going. I think there was rumors that the teachers had spies out and they're watching for you, but in general, I don't think that was true, and people kind of held themselves to their own level. I think in general, people were pretty good, at least until the end when people were getting really burnt out. But for the most part, when you're eating lunch, you're constantly around the teachers and they're speaking with you, and so people are hold themselves to a pretty high level.
So that was 9 weeks straight. You're not allowed to use English for 9 whole weeks. No
That's right.
breaks.
There is a long weekend in the middle where a lot of people go home or go off campus and they can speak English then. But outside of that, 9 weeks. The first time I did it as a second year, my level was relatively low. And I think you really feel, for me it was mentally exhausting to feel like I was regressing to a child where I could simply only say very basic things like, I'm hungry, I'm sleepy, I'm sick of studying Chinese at Middlebury. And I think that they really push you to your limit. I think most of myself and other classmates felt at times where we thought, gee, I don't know if I can continue doing this. This is really exhausting. And most people said, this is a one-off thing, I would never do it again. But it's interesting how many people do return for a second year when they realize the progress that they can make. I think that, in my experience, it's probably the most progress you can make in a 9-week period. It's really a boot camp.
Okay.
We would joke that it does feel a little bit like summer camp. You're in the mountains of Vermont. You're all staying in dormitories. I guess there were some parties. There was some dating. But for the most part, I think that you're really too busy to think about anything else. You're mostly just in the library cramming Chinese words.
But some guys were hitting on other Americans in Chinese.
Absolutely, yeah. And then there was some inappropriate use of Chinese.